Hey, good morning, everybody, and welcome to another episode of The Unlock Show. I'm your host, Tracy Wilson, and you guys are in for an absolute treat this morning with the guest that I have with me. If you've been thinking about or listening to The Unlock Show, you'll know that I've been harping on and on and on about content creation and how amazing it is if you were to create your own live show or your own podcast. Now, I'm a big advocate of people being a host of their own show. However, there is another way. So if you've been thinking, gosh, I'm not quite ready to jump in, go the full hog and create my own show and be the host of that show, but I might like to be a guest on podcasts, but wondering how the heck do you do that? Is it really worth it? How do you get on some big named podcasting shows? Then today's guest is going to spill the beans on all of that. You are going to want to listen up. So my very special guest today is Jason Cercone. He's a creative professional, an amazing podcaster, strategist, specializing in podcast guest optimization. So like I said, if you're thinking about wanting to be a guest on podcasts, he's your man. He's the founder of Cercone Consulting, in which case he helps brands and professionals get booked as guests on top-ranked podcasts. And he also helps them leverage authority-building power of the podcasting platform. He's also the host of Evolution of the Brand, a podcast featuring stories and strategies from self-defined professionals and leaders. So a huge big welcome to you, Jace. Great to have you here on the show. Can't wait to unlock all of the knowledge and experience that you have when it comes to being able to amplify people's mission and their message through utilizing, this platform that we have, which is podcasting, right? So welcome.
Well, thank you for having me, Tracy. I'm really looking forward to sharing all this great information with you and all of your great listeners. I think we're going to have a lot of fun today. Everybody's going to learn a lot. I promise you that.
I have absolutely no doubt. If Jason's come to me, one of my team said, you're going to really enjoy having the conversation with Jason today. So I want to make sure that in every single episode that you guys know, when you come to the Unlock Show, you're going to get actionable steps and tools and resources. And like every other show, today is full of those. So I know that Jason's going to bring it when it comes to giving us actionable steps. But let's kind of do a little bit of a deep dive. Let's go back in time, and maybe Jason can tell us a little bit about how did you even get into this podcasting space, and why was it that you've gone down the path of like, I know the way, you've got to be a guest on people's podcasts. Like, how did that all come about?
It's a fun story. I started podcasting back in 2015, and podcasting was coming into its own. I think it still to some degree is coming into its own. There's few million podcasts out there. Many of them haven't produced new content in the last 90 days. The statistics are varying depending on which publication you look at. But overall, there's still a lot of room for growth in this space. But I was in the craft beer industry at that time in 2015, and I had launched an app here in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, where I'm located, that was designed to help connect beer drinkers to different events, different things that were happening around town. Different businesses were getting involved. They were really excited to join me in this venture to see what we could do to just amplify the message and really blow some things up and get people's exposure grown in the city. And when I launched the app, I had this guy start trolling me on Twitter saying, oh, this is terrible. This is never going to work, blah, 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 blah. And I wondered, well, what does this guy do? Why is he bothering with me? What does he do for, I don't know, a living? But overall, I went and looked at his Twitter profile, and he hosted a beer podcast. And I decided, well, this is what we're going to do. My friend and I have been talking about doing a podcast. We couldn't land on an idea. And I called my buddy up. I said, I've got our idea. This is what we're going to do. And we're going to do it better than this guy. Mm-hmm. And we took about 2 weeks to get equipment. We did no planning. We sat down in a noisy bar to record our very first episode. I didn't even have a microphone stand. I had the styrofoam, the protective styrofoam that the microphone came in. I shoved my microphone into the styrofoam and used that. We did no editing. We put it out on the internet, and it was garbage. It was terrible. And I can say that, I mean, as we progressed and the show went on, we got better, and it rekindled a passion for me. And when I was in college, I had a radio show. I absolutely loved it. And I lightly looked into pursuing it as a career once college ended. and it didn't pan out. And it was probably a good 13 years until, between leaving college and getting back into podcasting. And I just discovered that this is just as fun as it was, if not more. And I want to get better at this. So we took that podcast as far as we could. And then I launched a second podcast. And in the midst of doing that, I looked at everything that was going on and said, I feel like this is really where I want to be, but I want to get better at it. So the podcast that I had just launched, I shut it down and decided to just take a year and a half off and study. And I didn't really say, okay, it's a year and a half. This is how long I'm going to take. That's just how long it ended up being. But I took some time to listen to other podcasters. I listened to radio personalities, people on television, newscasters, sportscasters, ultimately just to see how they spoke to the camera and how they conducted themselves in interviews and when they were on the microphone. And I really learned a lot and felt that all of those skills, I could take the things that I liked and bring them into what was my voice and how I projected myself on podcasts. So jumped back in and things really started taking off. And then it was before the pandemic, I had started working with a friend that wanted to launch a show. And he told me, look, I want to do this, but I'm really not sure how. Can you tell me what I'm in for? And I said, sure, I'd love to. And I gave him a rundown. And as I was explaining all of the things that go into producing a podcast, I felt like I was scaring him a little bit because there really is a lot to it if you want to be successful. By the time I got done with my spiel, he was like, wow, that's a little bit more than I thought. So I said, yeah, it's pretty intense. And this is why a lot of podcasters don't get beyond 7 or 8 episodes. They get started, realize how much work is involved, and then say, whoa, this doesn't fit my schedule. This is way more intense than I thought. And they walk away. So I said, listen, why don't we partner up and I'll help you with the production side. I'll take care of editing and you just have to record and I'll do everything else for you. And he loved that idea. And that's really what started everything. So I started working with him, started working with some other people. And then in the midst of doing all that, I discovered how the guest spot really is this really important, critical element to a podcast. And I wanted to start helping people get booked on the right shows so they could build their brand and get their message out there on podcasts that they already had an established audience, and it would give them some targeted customers, potential customers to talk to. And in doing that, I discovered that some people have that gift of gab. They can do this naturally, but others really need some coaching and training to do it right. So I developed a training program that really shares all the ins and outs of how to do this successfully. And that's what I've been doing today. So in addition to that, I host my own podcast, and that's pretty much everything in a nutshell.
I absolutely love it. And, your story reminds me very much of it's very in alignment with even Gary Vaynerchuk's kind of story, him starting out working with his dad, selling his dad's wine. And then all of a sudden, hey, I've got to get my message out there. I have to amplify this. What am I going to do? Go to video or some way of being able to tell your story. And most people that are in this kind of online world now know who Gary V is, and that's kind of how he started too. But I love the fact that when you started out, you'd have, hey, I'm just going to give this a go. Don't have to do anything fancy, but then realizing that I want to up the ante on this. I want to improve what I'm doing, but then not just going out and improving it by kind of learning from yourself, but actually spending the time to go and research and listen and watch other podcasters, because I think whether it's a podcast or whether it's, a live show like this, there's a lot to be learned simply by, listening and watching what actually happens, from the camera work to how the use of the mic, the projection of voice, all of these different things that a lot of the time, starting out, you don't even think about, but as time goes on, they become pretty important. Right. So let's talk about, you sort of touched on this, and the fact that the podcasting space has got such an opportunity right now. Why do you, it's been around for quite some time. Why do you still think that podcasting is still a really I'm going to say lucrative, a great opportunity for people to be able to get their message out there? Why do you still say that today?
There's several reasons, and it really depends on which way you're coming at it. If you're coming at it with wanting to launch your own show, when you compare the number of podcasts that are available to the world versus the number of blogs or the number of YouTube channels, the number of podcasts is just a fraction. And a lot of people think, well, this is getting really saturated and I don't know if it's right for me because there's so many podcasts out there. There are, but you have to remember that your voice is unique, your message is unique. So if you can commit to doing a podcast, you should absolutely do it because it's a great way to communicate. It's a great way to position yourself as an authority and expert. And it's a great way to network. And if you have time to do this, starting a show is great. If you don't, and this is what I tell everyone, if you don't have time, it's okay. You don't have to have your own podcast. Be a guest on other shows. And the opportunity for that is just as enormous because there are new people coming in listening to podcasts every day. Podcasts are getting more authority in regards to search results. When people do search results or are looking for answers to the problems that they have, Google will sometimes spit back podcasts for them to listen to. So there's another way to get discovered and another way to have your message heard by an audience that is looking for exactly what you offer. So if you put yourself, I'm sorry.
Yeah, I was absolutely. So you're saying if you put yourself out there, the huge amount of opportunity that exists, yeah?
That's right. Yeah. I mean, that, and that's just a small element. And the big companies, not big companies, small companies, you name it, they're using the podcast platform for advertising now. Because podcast listeners, it's been proven, more of them listen to ads all the way through and actually make purchases based off of things they hear on podcasts. So it's a good medium to be a part of in one way, shape, or form. It really comes down to what your goals and expectations are and how much time you have to commit to being a part of it. But you can win on this platform if you do things right.
And I think that's really interesting too, because you're saying, you know, people committing to having their own show and being, you know, the host of their show. Yeah, there's a time commitment associated with that. I mean, huge amount of benefit that comes with it. But if you're starting out and you want to dip your toe in the water, or even if you want to go the full hog and really set yourself up so that you're not having to do a whole lot of that legwork, so to speak, in the setup and, you know, production and editing and what have you, you could just simply get started by being a guest on other people's shows. And I want to kind of do a deep dive on that and, you know, give people some tools and resources and know-how of how to go about doing that. Sure. Now, you also mentioned that there are the number of podcasts that get started, and what I found is fascinating when I started in this space too. It's the same kind of thought pattern, right? Gosh, it must be saturated. There's so many podcasts out there. And then when you actually start looking at the statistics, like Jace was saying, that, you know, a lot of people get started, but most people never, ever make it past about the 5th or 6th episode. So if you're someone who can make it past that, then you are likely to be in the minority of podcasts. And as you know, pretty proud, I suppose. Went back and had a look at how many episodes we've done with the Unlock Show. I think we're knocking on the door of 200. So it's like you say, it's one of those things that you make a commitment to and you just do it. You know, you schedule it into your diary and you make it happen. So let's talk a little bit about, you know, okay, so I've decided I want to start being a guest on other people's shows. How do I determine what I should talk about is probably the first thing? Because I think a lot of people kind of go, yeah, I want to do it, but what are how do I come up with my topics or my, you know, the things that I'm going to speak about that are going to appeal to somebody else so they actually look attractive to somebody to have on their podcast?
Sure. I think that you have to understand what your passions are, what your skills and expertise are, because when you really hone in on those, that's typically something you could talk about if nobody was in the room listening to you. You could pretty much just go on and on and on, and it wouldn't matter if you had an audience or not. So if you're in a specific industry or niche, knowing exactly what you're good at is the best way to start, because you do have something to offer. Because a lot of people will get hung up thinking that, oh, well, somebody else has already said this and so said that. What do I really have to offer? The answer is you have your own unique perspective to offer, even if it's something that somebody's already said. None of us are reinventing the wheel. We're putting our own dynamic spin on it, but people are attracted to other people that tell a good story, that are compelling, that position themselves as someone that knows what they're talking about. And that's the type of person that, personally, if I'm looking at it from a consumer side, that's who I'd like to do business with. You know, if I'm going to the doctor to have surgery, I want to have the best guy or girl in the house. I don't want to have the person that barely made it through med school and is struggling to spell the word scalpel, let alone use one. So if you go on podcasts and position yourself as that expert, as that resource that's going to help somebody, that's going to let somebody know that you're a good person to turn to. That's always going to give you subject matter to talk about, because good podcasters know their job is to create content that's going to make others listen and then stick around for more. And when they stick around for more, they keep getting that impact, and then they start telling others. And that's how you grow an audience. So if you start thinking about the expertise that you can bring to the show based off of what you're passionate about and what you do within your company or within your brand, it's always going to give you something to talk about.
Absolutely. And I know I've spoken in previous episodes about, you know, how to come up with content ideas. So I'll actually find those episodes and I'll pop them into the show notes for today, because I know that's a sort of one of those spots that people go, oh, I don't know, what am I good at? How do I come up with those things? And how do I then turn them into topic ideas? So once I've kind of determined what am I good at and what am I going to speak about, what are some of the, I suppose, the most important aspects of what I need to bring together to make me look good so that somebody else wants to have me on their podcast? What are some of the things that I'm going to need to have?
Well, it all starts with being rooted in value. You need to understand that your role as a podcast guest is not to show up on any given show and go into sales mode, because nobody is listening to a podcast for an infomercial. And that's really what it comes off as if you go into sales mode, and it can be incredibly hard to listen to. If people start tuning out a show because of that, they could lose faith in that podcast and never come back. And now the host is in a position where I'm trying to grow this thing, and here you are selling all day and ultimately turning people off to what I have to offer. So your job is to show up with a valuable message, bring your knowledge and your expertise, and have a good conversation. Just have a good one-on-one back and forth, have some fun with it. And what's going to happen as the conversation unfolds is you're going to be able to share your story in a compelling fashion. You're going to put all your knowledge and expertise out there. And if you do a good job helping contribute to good content, the host is going to sell for you. They're going to tell their audience, you need Tracy on your side. This is the resource for you. Go to their website, check things out. You're going to really be SOL if you don't. And that's the power of having a good conversation and just being rooted in value. So you have to have that mindset from the start, is you're not showing up to sell. You're showing up as a valuable asset. In order to position yourself so people will want to work with you, have a media kit that you can share that has information about who you are, what you do, why you're a valuable resource. It also provides some suggested questions and some expert topics that it's going to allow those hosts and producers to build a podcast interview that's catered to your expertise. They know that they need to get the most out of you. And if you're giving them questions that every time you're asked these questions, you can hit a home run with it, well, of course they're going to use that, because that's going to make better content at the end of the day. So have some good imagery. And I always say, look at what they're doing. If you're going to reach out to a podcast, look at how that podcast promoted their most recently produced episode. What kind of images did they put on their social media? Is it on their website? They're going to ask for this information from you. You can get an idea of what they do and then provide it for them right up front. So you save them some of that legwork. That's going to make you stand out as well. So anything you can do to put yourself ahead of all the other people that are just spraying and praying and sending the same exact message to any podcast within a 10-mile radius is going to put you in a position to stand out and get that spot that you're looking for. And then it comes down to the presentation, which really also needs to be rooted in value. And this is a little bit more detailed, but you have to make sure that you're going above and beyond just saying, hey, my name's Jason. I think I'm really good at this and this, and you should put me on your show. Podcasters get that pitch / presentation all the time. It's very, there's nothing to that. There's no substance to that. It's not telling the podcaster, okay, well, what are you going to talk about when you're on the show? Flip the script a little bit. If you were to find a podcast that it meets your mission and message, you want to go on that show and make a significant impact because the content that they already have in place very much aligns with what you do. If you listen to some of that content, you may discover something that resonates with you enough that you may recommend it to your clients before you ever go on the show. Tell them that story. When you reach out, say, hi, Tracy, I just want to let you know, I just listened to episode 53 where you were talking with Bob about X, Y, and Z. That was amazing content. You guys really hit a home run with that. I got to tell you, every day with my clients, we're always trying to figure out new solutions for X and Y. So I shared this information with 3 people already, and they loved it too. So if you're looking for new guests and you're interested in having me on because I know something about this, I'd love to help you continue the conversation and we can make an impact on your audience together. If I send you that presentation, you're probably going to look at that a little bit deeper and a little bit closer than the person just says, I'm cool, put me on your show. So that's a big part of the process is you have to get noticed before you can get that guest spot. So on the front end, those are the biggest pieces that you need to have in place.
And just a couple of things I'll add. I so agree with that, Jason, because every day now, in the early days when you're starting out creating your own podcast, nobody knows you. You're not getting these requests, right? People are not saying, hey, you're not getting pictures like that. So you're having to start out, you're like, who are my friends and who are the cool people that I know that I could potentially bring onto my show? So, you might be doing some outreach to get people on your show. But I'm going to speak now from a point of view of, I get pictures every single day. I can open up my email and I'll have, 3 or 4 pictures from people every day. And so the stuff that Jason's talking about is very, very real. When you're going through them, the ones that get to my team that I say, hey, this would be a really cool person to have on the Unlock show are ones that are deep-seated, full of, hey, I actually took the time to listen to some of your episodes. I heard you speak about blah, 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 blah. I can add to that conversation. And here's how I can add to that conversation. And here's some of the things that I would love to leave with value on and provide to your audience. Those are the ones that generally get through. And what I can also tell you is that when you're pitching to some of the top podcasts, just remember that, like Jay says, they're getting requests on the regular. They're getting them all the time. So having something that is going to make their life easier, that is going to make you stand out from the crowd, and the things that he's spoken about in terms of being prepared are super important because they have little time to try and, create things for you to have you as a guest on the show. So I just wanted to add that because I've certainly seen that as the Unlock show has progressed and has grown, the more and more requests I'm getting each week. But, to your point, the ones that we really look at are the ones that cover all the things that you've spoken about, give some topic ideas, say that they've actually been and had a bit of a listen and provide some real good value. So I think that's super important.
Absolutely. Yeah, you got to make sure you align or else it's going to be a waste of everyone's time.
Totally. And it makes it difficult for the host and you to have a good quality conversation because you're kind of not on the same page. What do you think are some of the biggest mistakes that people make when they go to pitch themselves? I know we've covered some of these, but what are some of the stuff that you've seen that are like, don't go there?
Yeah, this list is extensive. I mean, I can tell a story about a podcast that I have in place. I'm not making active content for it right now, but it's called Pod Theory, and it's still available and you can listen to it. And the idea behind Pod Theory was to create content that would help podcasters make better podcasts. So there's about 130 some episodes that you can consume, and most of them are really short, between 5 to 10 minutes. And it was just covering a different tip every day, just to, again, when I first made this foray into full-time podcasting, I wanted to talk about something I was passionate about, and that was podcasting. So it's a good show, and I enjoyed it a lot, but it's specifically for podcasters, and I'm not trying to oversell this. It's to set up this story that I'm about to tell. So one day I got an email. It was in like June, I think it was 2021. I got this email from a gentleman who the email literally said, not even like, hey, Jason, it started with this. 4th of July is a terrible time for dogs. Those fireworks are going off left and right, and those loud booms really scare our favorite animals, and they have to hide under the bed, and it's really torturous. And I'd love to come on your podcast and talk to your audience about this. So I'm like reading this email saying, I don't have a dog podcast in any respect. Why would I have you come on my show? Now, granted, I can feel sympathetic as a dog lover because I know that they hate fireworks and that's not the best time of year for them. But my audience isn't coming to my podcast to listen to dog caring tips. Like, why aren't you reaching out to podcasts that are about pet care or about dog lovers or something that's more in the ballpark? I mean, we're 20 yards off the reservation with the content I have versus what you want to talk about. People do that all the time. And that's the thing. When I saw that, I mean, I sent that to some friends. I said, this guy probably sent this exact same email to 200 people today. Didn't look at who the podcast is where he just saw a podcast name with an email and he sent the request. Maybe one person will respond. That's such a waste of your time. Because again, if you're not reaching out to shows that align, then there's really no reason for that person to bring you on. Also, in addition, I wasn't having guests at that time. I started working in guests later, but at that time it was just me solo for 5 to 10 minutes. So again, people reach out to shows that are solo format thinking that the podcaster is going to change up their format just for them. Newsflash, they're not. People do solo formats for a reason. There's a lot of great solo format podcasts out there, and they're probably in no mindset of thinking, oh, well, this person looks so good, I have to change my entire format and approach to bring them on. No, don't waste your time. Do some research, listen to some shows. I have a process that I go through to make sure that before I ever reach out, that I know it makes sense for me. Obviously, I make sure they accept guests, because if they don't accept guests, why would I bother? Then I look to see if they've produced content in the last 30 days. People do that as well. I have some clients or past clients that aren't podcasting anymore, still getting requests for people to come on the show. Like, they haven't had content in months. Why would you think they're going to have you on the show? They don't even have new content coming out right now. So make sure new content is coming. I have a 30-day window. If a podcast hasn't produced content in the last 30 days, I move on. Now, I may come back later because maybe they're just on a break. But for now, I know that this isn't going to serve me. So I move on to the next step in the process. And that's to look at the cover art and the description of the show. Is the cover art aesthetically appealing? Does it grab your eye? Or was it just a couple clip art design or clip art images thrown onto something in Microsoft Word? The amount of TLC that somebody puts into their cover art and the description of their show is a good indicator of the overall TLC they put into the production of their podcast. Because that cover art is the first thing that people discover when they're looking for a new podcast. It's going to jump, just like anything else, that catchy design is going to grab you to make you click. And then the description is going to tell you in a few sentences what this show is all about and what you're going to learn when you listen to that podcast. If we check that box off, then I look at their presence outside of the podcast. I'm sorry, I skipped one. I'm sorry. Then I look at ratings and reviews just to get an idea of what the world is saying about this podcast. Then I look to see if they have a website and social media, because that gives me an idea of if I'm doing an interview with these guys and everything goes well, when it goes live, this is how they'll produce me and publish my episode and share it with the world. All those boxes get checked. Then I listen to the content. Make sure it sounds good, and make sure the messaging aligns with what my objectives are. We check off all those boxes, then I do the outreach. So instead of wasting time just spraying and praying to try to contact 100 episodes a day, find 2 or 3 by doing some quality research. And I'm not saying you have to listen to every episode all the way through. You can quicken up the speed to 1.5 times or 2 times. You can listen to a segment of the content just to get a feel for it. But there's so much more value in that than trying to just throw a bunch of spaghetti at the wall to see what will stick. Because when you do it that way, what ends up happening is if it isn't really aligned and it's just a podcast that happened to say yes for whatever reason, because they're spraying and praying in reverse more than likely, when you get on the interview, you don't know what to talk about. And it ends up going off the rails. And people listen to it going, what am I listening to?
Yeah.
So if you're not thorough and you're not thinking about the value of the entire process right from the start, you're going to cost yourself a lot of time and you're going to waste a lot of time as well.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. I mean, I'm a big kind of, planner and steps kind of person. So I love that process that you've gone through. So in terms of like, I'm now wanting to, I'm going through this process, but I'm wanting to find some that are really, I suppose, in my pocket, in my niche. Are there any platforms or tools that you think are really useful for people to be able to find great podcasts to be on?
There's a number of different services that are out there, but I mean, if you really want to just go DIY, go to Google to start and type in best, whatever your industry is, podcasts. Google's doing a fantastic job indexing podcasts now, so you're going to get a nice list of returns. Some of them aren't going to be in your wheelhouse, but at least you're going to get something to look at. Then you can go as far as if you find a podcast that you think looks good, do something like podcasts just like such and such. So you can get a little deeper with the search. You can also do that on the actual podcast apps. Like I use Podchaser and I use Apple Podcasts. So you can go on those and you can look up shows there. Then there are services that you can either use for free. Like the one I swear by is Podmatch. Tracy, that's where we met. Podmatch is phenomenal.
Yep, totally.
And you can use the free service they offer, or you can upgrade to the paid service, and that gives you so much more when you do. Programs like that are out there and all over the place, so there's really no excuse for not being able to find podcasts. I've heard, and that was, I was at a podcast convention last year. So many people were talking about how they just couldn't find enough guests. And I'm like, really? I mean, are you getting out of bed? Because they're everywhere. People want to go on podcasts and share their expertise. They're dying to get the word out there about what they do and who they are. You just have to know where to look for them, and you have to approach them in a valuable way. So, yeah, that's the biggest thing you got to keep in mind is rooting everything in value and finding a service that does it. Podmatch is one of them. I can't speak can't speak any more highly about that than I can.
I actually dedicated an entire show on that specifically, like how to go and how to set yourself up in Podmatch, because like you, I'm a big fan of that platform. I think Alex has done an amazing job of putting that platform together. So those of you that are looking for a platform to use that will really help to match you up, Jason's mentioned it today, and it's Podmatch, guys. We'll pop the link into the description for you today too, so that you can head on over there and just check it out. When you're looking at, what show should I be on? Audience size. Like, should I be looking at that? And does that really matter when deciding which podcast I should appear on as a guest?
Nope. I could leave it at that, but I won't.
Interesting, right? Yeah.
No,
you're a fan of words now, because most people would think, yeah, it does.
Many people do. No, there's no doubt about it. Many people do, and this is probably one of the most heated, passionate subjects I have, or at least in regards to like what gets me fired up, because that download metric that's part of the podcasting space. So many people think that is the live and die, be all end all number. Everything about my show, the success, the failure, it's all predicated on my download number. No, you got to get past that. As a guest looking for shows, you got to get beyond how many downloads a show has. I had a guy come on he reached out to me. My show was 4 weeks old. He reached out to me wanting to be on it. I said, sure. Before we started, he goes, how many downloads do you have? I said, I don't know. He goes, what do you mean you don't know? I said, I haven't looked. The show's 4 weeks old. What am I going to learn in 4 weeks about a download from a download number? He was so blown away. I said, well, listen, I mean, if you don't want to do this, then you can leave. You reached out to me, man. And we ended up doing it, and the interview was great. I mean, everything went fine. I was just like, No, like I made a commitment. I'm not going to look for a year. I still haven't looked at my stats. It's meaningless to me. I'm building valuable content. That's all I want to do. The numbers are going to fall into place if I consistently put good content out there. I get that good content by connecting with entrepreneurs and professionals that have a great story to tell and want to have a good platform to tell it. If we can have a great conversation, they know, I know, when people discover this, they're going to start telling everybody. That's how the audience has grown to this point. So 6 months later, I've been able to expand to where I put out 2 episodes a week because I've had such demand from the audience that did grow, saying they wanted more, and the people that wanted to be on the show. I couldn't, in good faith, say, yeah, I'll interview you today, but this won't go live for 8 months. That was unfair. So I switched to doing 2 episodes a week. And that has nothing to do with download numbers. So a lot of people think that you have to get on the biggest show. When I get into podcast guesting, I'm going to go on Tim Ferriss, Amy Porterfield, Joe Rogan, and we'll get Howard Stern in the mix too. You're not doing it right because those audiences are very broad. There's not a lot of targeted ideal customers in those audiences for you. Now you may have a few, there's no doubt, because there is massive audience size there. However, you can get more value from a smaller podcast that may have a few hundred downloads or a few hundred listeners, but all those listeners are targeted. They're coming to that podcast for a specific reason because that host has very niche content. So if you find podcasts in your space that are talking about what you do, talking to those people is going to get you much more in regards to results than trying to go on the biggest show in the world. Plus, if you're just getting started, you're probably not good at this yet. We all have to start somewhere, and the best way to improve is to continue telling our story, getting on the microphone, and getting better at our craft. As you get better, that starts to get noticed, and your reputation starts to grow. Now the bigger shows might start to take notice of who you are and say, I like how you talk. I like how you tell your story. I'd love to bring you on the show. So you got to be in a position to know that you have to earn it. You can't just start from the top and work your way down. Start at the bottom, work your way up, but understand at the bottom, there is a lot to be gained.
Absolutely. And what's interesting about that too is that, even starting out, getting on some people's podcasts that are new, what's going to happen with that? If they're sticking at it, maybe you're in sort of the first 20 episodes, somewhere about that. They're always enthusiastic. They're doing their thing. They're trying to get their message out. So the likelihood of you actually getting really good exposure to a very specific audience is extremely high, because that podcaster in those early phases or the early stages of their podcasting, right, are super enthusiastic, are excited about what they're doing. They haven't, you've got them before they've fallen off the bandwagon, but also you've got them past that critical hump of 5 or 6 episodes where that they are doing it consistently. So I think there's a lot of merit in actually, getting on some early stage podcasts to talk about, to really share value and add to the conversation for their particular audiences. And I love the fact that you mentioned, don't even look at your download stats. I see so many people going, they've done 4 episodes, like you say, and they're like, oh my God, my download stats are not looking fantastic. Give it some time. Keep doing it. Repetition and being consistent is your friend in this space, right? Because like you say, you're going to get better and better and better at your craft. And I don't know about you, but as you get better and better at it, something happens. There's just something really magical about getting on the mic or even on camera and starting to talk about your stories, your craft. There's a certain level of confidence that grows within you. Your mindset changes. There's a whole lot of stuff that's almost, I'm going to say, the intangibles that happen through either being a guest on other people's podcasts or just getting up and speaking and being a podcaster, or show host yourself. Would you agree with that? Like, what are some of the things that you've seen personally that have happened to you because you've been showing up consistently and doing this?
It's the reps. It's the practice swings. I mean, I've golfed since I was 7 years old. I'm not PGA level at this point in my life, and I never will be, but I've gotten better. I'm better now than I was when I was 7, because for the past 30 plus years, I've been taking practice swings all the time to get better at the sport that I love. That works the same with anything you do. The more you do it, the better you get. When you were an infant and a child, you didn't just come out and start running around in circles. You laid in place and could hardly move, and then eventually you figure out how to roll over, and then you were able to pull yourself up, and then you could walk by holding on to the edge, and then you had the guts to let go of the edge. And as you just kept pushing yourself to get better at what you were doing, the skill set came and fell into place. It works with podcasting the same way. You have to put in the reps. You have to understand that this is more of a marathon than it is a sprint. I don't know what person said, oh yeah, podcasting's easy, and once you get into it, you can have results super quick, because so many people believe it. Like, who are you listening to that had that message? Because it's insane. Like, to go back to the download number conversation for a moment, people will say, yeah, I only get like 50 downloads on my podcast. It sucks. And my immediate response to that is, well, what's a good number? No one has an answer for that, because no one knows. It's an arbitrary number. So then I always follow that up with, if those 50 people were in your living room and you were throwing a party, would you get the swill beer and the bottom shelf Bankers Club vodka? Would you invest a little in the good stuff? Would you maybe cater the party? Would you bring in a bartender to make real classy cocktails? You would show up for those people who showed up for you. You can't disrespect the 50 people that have shown up, looking past them going, where are the other 100,000? You have to respect who you have and give them a reason to turn around to a colleague or a friend and say, you got to listen to Tracy's podcast. It's so good. There's so much good content on that show. Because those 50 people, if you respect them by continuing to give them good content, by communicating with them, by thanking them for being part of your audience, they tell 50 other people, now you've got 100 listeners in your audience.
Yeah.
Those 100 start telling a person, now you've got 200. There's your math lesson for the night. Exponential growth is where it's at, but you have to make yourself recommendable. If your content isn't worthy of being recommended, you're not going to grow. And the only way to make that happen is to keep your focus on the value. So if you've put your focus on quality content that sounds good and having good conversations with people that are like-minded, that's going to help you grow. That's going to make you stand out. And that's going to make you get better, because you have this passion and this confidence. The better you get, the more conversations you have, I'm not saying it gets easy, but you get more comfortable. And when you're comfortable, you're more confident, and then that can take things through the roof.
Absolutely. And I love, this whole concept of, create, what am I going to create? Am I going to create my own show, or am I going to be a guest on others? And just going at it from a place of, what's my intention here? My intention is not to get onto these, and because I think a lot of people start or wanting to do this craft because I want to make sales. I'm doing it because I want to grow my business. And yes, of course, that's going to come with time, but you lead with, like, as you say, you're going to lead with value. What are the things that my audience would want or need right now? And maybe it's one of those times where we go back in our own journey and go, what did I want or need at that time? What was it that I was searching and looking for? Because more often than not, your audience will be at that point somewhere in your journey that you've already been, that you can actually add value, give them the, tools, resources, knowledge, even some of the pitfalls, some of the things that maybe don't do this, because I went down that hole and that didn't work so good. Some of those things to avoid on their journey. And when you do that, and when you come at it from that place, like Jason's saying, is that you are going to end up with loyal followers that are going to want to listen to you. And more often than not, they'll listen to one episode, right? And if they're interested in that particular subject matter, and this is the feedback that I've got, is people will say to me, hey, I watched such and such and such a show. I watched one. Oh, and then I went on down some more, and I watched the next one and the next one. And they'll end up binge watching or binge listening, I should say. And that happens a lot, right? Once you kind of get your hands on a podcast that you like, you're going to listen to a lot of it, and you get to know that person, like that person, trust that person in a really, I'm going to say, intimate way, because they're in your ears.
You nailed it on the head. And that's yet another reason why you can't get hung up on the download metric, because that number is always growing. It's funny to me how when we put out a new episode, you think about the dynamic of someone that's posting their freshly made content, their brand new episode that just went live this morning on whatever social media platform they're a part of, on their website, wherever. They are ecstatic. You got to listen to this episode. It is so good. This is the greatest content of all time, blah, 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 blah. In 2 days, they're like, done with this. It's on to the next episode. And then you rinse and repeat. I understand that you have to get behind your new content, but you shouldn't be less excited about episode 1 when episode 50 goes live. It's all part of your catalog. It's all part of this great piece of content that as a whole is presenting something to the world that they can learn from. And it happens exactly like you said, Tracy. You find a podcast, you listen to the most recent episode, you're hooked. You love what you heard. The first thing you say is, wow, if this episode was this good, I bet everything else is too. I'm going back to episode 1. Start playing catch up. So now you've got this person in your ecosystem. The more people you have doing that download number keeps going up. So if you are going to look at download metrics, don't look at just the most recent episode. Look at your whole catalog. That's what you want to build the performance on, because the whole catalog is what's going to serve you. Yeah, like I said, yet another reason the download number, screw it. It's irrelevant.
Totally. And a lot of people can be put off because they're like, oh, nobody's listening. When in fact, what you want to look at, in my opinion, is sort of the trend, what's happening over time. Have you got enough content in the bank to even see, is there a trend here? And if your trend is going up, hey, kudos to you. You're doing a good job.
Exactly.
That's a good sign. So, I can't speak highly enough or encourage people enough to just get out and speak. Just talk about your experiences. Because like Jason said right at the beginning, you have a unique spin on what it is that you do and the way in which you do it. And other people are going to want to hear and listen and potentially do what you do. So I think it's, podcasting and doing a live show is, in my opinion, has been the number one thing that has actually, even though it takes a bit of time, it's actually saved me a whole heap of time. Because prior to doing this, what were we doing? Trying to figure out how to post this on Facebook, this on Twitter, this on LinkedIn, this on all the different platforms, trying to create all of this different content. Whereas creating a live show or a podcast, there's so many things that you can recreate out of just one episode. I mean, out of this episode, as I was saying to Jason, it'd be the same. Out of a podcast or a show episode, I'm pulling 50 pieces of content from this sort of stuff. There's no way in the world I would be able to create that amount of content by trying to do it in single motion. It just wouldn't happen.
Right.
So I want to know, before we kind of wrap up today, like to get going and get, to figure out how many podcasts should I be doing as a guest? Like what's the norm? Is it one a week? Should I be doing one a day? What's your advice on that?
That's a great question. And really, it comes down to the individual. And you should never put yourself in a position to where being a podcast guest is going to be inconvenient. So you have to work with what you can manage. I typically advise to start with one a week. You don't want to do one a month, one every few months, because you really need to. There's a couple of reasons why. There's some log jams that you're going to run into with this space, because podcasters are proactive with the creation of their content. So it may take a few weeks to even get your interview to go live. To get your interview to take place. And then from there, it could be a few months before it goes live. So when do you start podcast guesting? The answer is last month, because you really have to get the ball rolling. And once you get that consistency in place, once shows start popping up, they're going to start popping up all over the place. I typically advise to get comfortable to start with one a week. Just block some time and if you can afford to block an hour a day. Because what's going to happen is you may find a podcast that they could only see you on Tuesday at 3:00. but then you'll find another podcast, their time is Thursday at 4 o'clock. So you want to make sure you can give yourself the hour and be flexible with it. And then if you don't have an interview, use that hour for some other deep work. Once you get comfortable and you say, this is working, I'm getting more confident, I'd like to do more, then you can start to build upon your schedule. Like, this is my 5th interview today. I've gotten to the point now where this is my thing. I love doing this. So for me to build my brand in this capacity, I love I had interviews wall to wall today. And I looked at it, I'm like, yeah, this is awesome. Because I get to connect with great people like you, Tracy. We get to have wonderful conversations. We get to impact the audience and share some great information that, quite frankly, everyone needs to hear, in my opinion, because I feel like this is such a powerful way to take your brand to the next level. I love being able to spread that word around and being on as many shows as I possibly can. It's fun. You know, and I did 3 interviews for my show yesterday. It's been a couple of days jam-packed with podcasting, and I love every second of it. But you don't want it to interfere with other priorities that you have in your business. Start small, get comfortable, and then grow from there and add accordingly.
Awesome. Well, I couldn't agree with you more. I think it's a fantastic way to get your message out, and I want to encourage people to do that. There's a couple of things that we want to share today, because I know before we sort of jumped on and went live, Jason and I had a bit of a chat about a couple of things that I think we should make available to everybody. One is that Jason's going to have a page that you guys can go to. Jason, let me just pop it up. Let me pop it onto the screen. There you go, Jason Cercone /unlocked. And I'll let Jason sort of explain to you what you can find after the show. So not today, but tomorrow. He'll have this ready to go, because it'll have the show obviously on there, and you'll be able to download some other fantastic things. But I'll let him share with you what you can find once you head on over to jasoncercone.com /unlocked.
Yeah, what I specialize in and what I love helping people do is understand the fundamentals of being a value-driven podcast guest, but also providing the tools, the strategies, and the methods to do it well. So when you go to jasoncercone.com /unlocked, I put together a quick guide called 10 tips for becoming a valuable, fully optimized podcast guest. And in that guide, it's really something that's going to set the table and let you have an inside look at what it takes to really be a valuable podcast guest. Once you complete that guide, I would love to connect with you one-on-one to have a conversation about your goals and expectations and answer any questions that you might have about this type of content initiative. I can say from experience, from working with others, and from just my own experience, it's a tremendous way to build your brand. But I can completely understand that there may be some folks that have some reasons why they wouldn't want to move forward, but I'd love to at least have a conversation to determine if it makes sense for you. So there's ways that you can determine that once you land on my website. But after you're there, pick up that guide. It's free. It's my gift to you. And then you can jump over to the Guest Accelerator page and learn more about my training programs.
Beautiful. Well, there you go, guys. I would take Jason up on his offer, but particularly if you've been thinking about this for a while, because I know a lot of you are. Most people think about doing their own show or their podcast for some time before they make the leap. So if that's you, then take Jason up on his offer. Head on over to jasoncercone.com /unlocked. Again, we'll put this link into the show description, and go and take him up on his offer, get his free downloads. And if you so wish to continue the conversation with Jason, absolutely do so. There's a couple of other things that I'd like to give you guys. There's also a speaker's kit. I'm just going to pop that up on. Let me just get rid of this one, hide that one. Let's pop this one up. You can go to tracymwilson.com. I've got a bunch of free goodies over there. But if you go to speakers-kit-template, you can download my speaker's guide. That's more so if you're wanting to be a host as well as a guest. And there's a couple of templates there that I think you'll find very, very useful. Again, we'll pop those into the show notes so that you guys can get your hands on those today. Hey, Jace, a couple of things before we kind of dial out for today. Sure. What's the funniest thing that has ever happened to you on a podcast?
I would say, it's funny because it happened prior to a podcast, and then because of this, the podcast didn't happen. I had set up an interview, and this was a long time ago. This wasn't with my current show. This is with a show I was doing in the past. set up the interview. We got everything hammered out about what we were going to talk about. I had shared the link for how to join me. At that point, I believe I was using Skype. And time arrives. I open up the window. I'm waiting for the person to jump on. Here they come, and they're in their car driving and sitting in rush hour traffic. I'm like, yeah, I said, like, wait a minute. Why aren't you in front of your microphone? And well, I got caught and here I am in traffic, but I didn't want to miss the interview. And I said, well, we're not doing this because I'm not going to have audio quality with car horns beeping and car engines noise. It was ridiculous. So we ended up canceling and rescheduling and doing it later. But I was like, no, we're not doing this. And at the end, I laughed, but the lesson I learned was make sure that you're letting your guests know that you need them to be in front of a computer with reliable internet and a microphone so you can produce quality sound, because you're looking to build something that is catering to that listener experience. Nobody's going to want to listen to a guy swearing at the car next to him because he got cut off while he's sitting in rush hour traffic. So that was one of the funnier instances that's happened in my podcasting career.
The reason I asked that is, as we were preparing for today, I mean, obviously we're doing a live show here, and I had one of those moments of, oh, did I actually turn my, mic, my camera on or off? Because you can do that behind the scenes. But one of the funniest things that ever happened to me, because we're live, right? A lot of people don't always pick up. Like nowadays, we make sure that we tell people over and over again, it's a live show, so you need to turn up on time and be prepared for video. But I can recall this one particular time where I had this woman come on the show. She thought it was just a podcast, so wasn't dressed appropriately for us to be on a live show. So she was a little bit taken aback and a bit like, oh my God, look what I'm wearing, and no hair, no makeup, and all that sort of stuff before we got ready to go. But anyway, it was quite a funny instance, and I've had a couple of instances where again, early days, didn't quite have the camera angle right, and this is when my children were living at home with me. But kids walking out of their bedroom half naked, coming on the screen. It's some funny stuff that's happened. But anyway, it's always fun to share those kind of stories. Yeah. Because you know what, guys, we don't take ourselves too seriously around here. That sort of stuff happens. It makes for a good story a little bit further down the track. You have a bit of a laugh and a giggle, and you move on. But I want to say thank you very much for joining us today. It's been an absolute pleasure having you here. You've dropped some fantastic value bombs, and I hope that you guys, as we always do on the Unlock Show, just go back. If you listened to it the first time around and you didn't pick up all of the steps that Jace was talking about on what to do to be a guest on a podcast, go back and review those. Look at cover art, look at the descriptions, have a look at ratings and reviews, have a look, make sure that they actually have been active in the last 30 days, and then utilize some of the tools that Jason and I have given you today to do your outreach and get yourself booked on some podcasts. Let's see if you can do one a week, for the next little while, and just see what happens. And I'm sure, I certainly would love to know how you guys are getting on being a guest on some shows. You might even want to apply and be a guest on the Unlock Show. Get on the waiting list and come and be a guest here, and let's have a great chat if you're in alignment with the things that we talk about. And also, I'm sure Jason would love to know, how did you take his tips away, and how many shows have you managed to get yourself booked on? And go and check out Podmatch too, because both Jason and I are huge advocates of that platform. Absolutely. So anything that you would like to add to the conversation before we love and leave our listeners today?
I think the biggest thing to keep in mind is that even if you've never been on a microphone, you can do this. And many people have that mental block that they don't like the sound of their own voice and they don't want to go on shows because of that. And no one's going to want to hear that. The reality is you're the only one that thinks that. You're the only one in your head thinking that your voice is not something that other people want to hear, because others aren't listening to you in that capacity. They're listening to you for the valuable message that you have to offer. So get out there and try. And the more you do it, the better you'll get. So even if you've never been on a microphone before, know that you have the skill set inside. And if you do want to talk a little bit more about how to make that break free, I'm happy to have that conversation with you.
That's fantastic. Well, there you go, guys. You've heard it from two people that are out there doing it, and we want to hear your voice. And you never know, Jason and I might want to be a guest on your podcast. So if you decide you want to be a host, go out there, get it done, and let's hear your voice through the sound waves, because we want to hear it. But anyway, that being said, guys, I hope you've enjoyed today's conversation. I most certainly have enjoyed this conversation with Jason. Love talking about podcasting and being able to amplify your voice, and I want to hear you guys getting out there and doing exactly the same. So have a fantastic rest of the week. You guys know we'll be back here live again this Friday, 10 a.m. Brisbane time, and again next week with another amazing guest on the Unlock Show. I'm your host, Tracy Wilson, and we have been joined today by the amazing Jason Cercone. So thank you very much for being here. Thank you, everybody, for listening and tuning in today. We appreciate you a lot. And if you found this valuable, then go and tell your friends. Get them to tune in to the Unlock Show too, and let them hear how they too can use their voice to amplify their message and amplify the mission that they have to change the world. All right, guys, have a fantastic rest of the week, and I'll be sure to see you on another episode of the Unlock Show. Bye for now.
Take care, everyone.